Yes, Eagles.
And welcome in, everybody, to a Monday edition of Birds 365 here on JAKIB Sports as we kick off another week. I believe it's week number 6 of the Eagles offseason, and we got some stuff happening this week in Eagle Land. An exciting time as we get ready for the draft and some of the upcoming free agency stuff where the team will be, I don't want to say revamped, but retooled. Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Monday morning, brother, as we get into the week?
It's Monday. It's still dreary and crappy out and raining and snowing. I'd like to see a little bit of sun if we can get that at some point. It'd be nice, but we'll get through it. We'll get through it.
Yeah, no doubt. A little bit warmer though, Johnny Mac. You know, a little bit warmer around these parts. Snow is still holding on. stubborn bunch of snow.
Oh man, and it is ugly. It is ugly snow at this point. Just it's just dirty. It's hideous. Everything about it is hideous.
It really is. Well, it will not go away on us, John. But John, we get into another new week here, and there is some things happening in the NFL calendar. They always do a good job at keeping that calendar perfectly built. So the Super Bowl is now, well over a week in our rearview mirror. And the offseason is, going to be in full swing here. So franchise tag window opens this week. The Eagles finalized or made another hire I think it was on Friday. It was after our show, so we didn't have a chance to talk about it. And some other things that we will get to today as well. But John, give us kind of the rundown of the week and what this week looks like in Eagle land and also in NFL land as a whole.
Yeah, I think, the most notable thing to me, there's one offensive coordinator open left, and that's the LA Rams, who are probably going to promote Shieldhouse, but we'll see how they do. But when it's all said and done, when the Rams make their decision, 21 new offensive coordinators around the NFL, 21 of 32 teams, obviously, 21. So for the point that I think I said yesterday on social media, I think it's time to shelve the continuity bullshit. It doesn't exist at that level in the NFL. It just doesn't. So it can't be used as an excuse. As I said, and generally the ones that do have continuity are obviously the head coaches who call plays, which comes with its own run. For all we talk about Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur, and the Eagles are trying to copy their concepts and all that stuff, I got to tell you, Zander, they are bad game managers. So, that's one of the reasons you don't see a bunch of championships, but you see everybody copying them because they're copying the offensive scheme, the offensive concepts, yes, but they have to manage the game as the head coach as well. And a lot of times, and specifically you've seen it with McVay and Shanahan because they've advanced a little bit further than LaFleur, who's been a one-and-done guy, crops up at some point, and that's part of being a head coach as well. So it's a give and take, but if you do want continuity, you have to get a head coach who calls plays and isn't going to give it up. And I don't know if you want that. So it's a difficult decision to make, but for the rest of the people, 21 out of 32 is definitive proof. Stop talking about continuity, man.
John, any idea if that's a record? I mean, I know there is a lot of turnover each year, but that seems
that's got to be right. I don't know it for a fact, but that's got to be a record.
I mean, that's a big number, man.
It is. It was a big number. Remember, it was a big number of head coaches. So when you have that many head coaches, which was 10, which was big enough, but then you turn that and it's even doubled. And you think about it, the Eagles interviewed wanted to interview a bunch of the guys that got jobs. Brian Daboll in Tennessee, Mike McDaniel with the Chargers, Bobby Slowick they interviewed, who's in Miami now, Zach Robinson, who's with Tampa Bay, Declan Doyle, a lot of talk about him with Baltimore. And on and on and on. Obviously, Matt Nagy, who they interviewed with the New York Giants, they never interviewed Frank Reich, our old friend. He's with the Jets. Press Taylor, another guy with the Bears, old friend. familiar names all over the place. And obviously the Eagles hired Sean Mannion. 20 different guys. The Seahawks went outside the organization to get Brian Fleury because they lost their offensive coordinator to the Raiders. And he took Andrew Janoko, who would be the next in line. He's going to be the offensive coordinator with the Raiders. So they had to go outside the organization. Musical chairs, man.
Yeah, it really is.
Musical chairs. So yeah, it's time to put that to bed. Time to put it to bed. Not to mention the Eagles have succeeded with a first year because they have to. They've had a first year guy every year practically, exception being Shane, who's a year plus. And you know.
So I agree with you. You got to shelf it, but it is more part of like this new, I guess, new NFL. How long has this been, this prominent with this much change? Because I do agree with you, John, that you kind of have to shelf it. I mean, this is just life in the NFL. I do wonder the impact, John, it has from a bigger picture on player development, on offensive development, on quarterback development. And some of these things. Now, you've been around this game a lot longer than I have, and you know a lot more about it than I do, especially the history of it. How much do you think it's impacting that when it comes to player development and quarterback development and things like that?
Yeah, I think quite a bit. I mean, I talk about that all the time, but I think the bigger part of it is the lack of ability to work with the quarterback. So I don't think it changes that much if you have continuity, because you still can't work with the guys. In the old days, you could work with the guys.
Yeah, right.
Now you can't. So it doesn't really, it's probably a little bit better. You get comfortable with each other, you get to know each other better. But even that, it can go both ways, because do you stop listening to the voice in your ear? Do you hear the same messaging too much from the same person? So, but I think the far bigger problem isn't the upheaval at the coaching, which is normal, although it's elevated recently, like the rest of society, mirror of it. Everything's impatient, everything's quick. Everything's you better do it now. So there's a little bit less willing to be patient. But ultimately, I think even if you are patient, you aren't allowed to work with the quarterbacks anyway in the offseason, very strictly collectively bargained. So, I remember talking about that with John DeFilippo, because he sort of bridged the old era with the new era. And he's like, yeah, it's a lot different. He was basically saying, look, whenever you lost, whether you won the Super Bowl, you lost in the first round here, you're working with the quarterback the next day. A lot of times getting ready for the next season. Now you have exit meetings, and he's probably being facetious, but the point is the next week, you got him right back in the lab. And again, that's what the NFLPA has fought for, quality of life issues. They've won those battles because the NFL has been willing to give them up, because all they want is the almighty dollar, and they want more money and more money and more money, that's where we are. And that's why the product isn't as good as it once was. And luckily you have a younger group of fans who don't know the product was better. And and the secret is the games are exciting at the end. That's the secret. So you think about Scott Hansen calls it the witching hour on whatever Red Zone, where you have these, you sit there and you watch 55 minutes of terrible football, and then you have an exciting ending, whether it's somebody coming back or somebody making a big play, and you go, wow, that's pretty cool. I watch that. I call it the Sugar Ray Leonard effect. Sugar Ray Leonard figured out as he got older, one of the great boxers of all time, when he got older and he didn't have the same physical gifts, he figured out, if I just play defense for 2.5 minutes and then do a flurry in the last 30 seconds, he'll win the round, because people remember what they see last. It's like a psychological experiment. And that's where the NFL is. But yeah, development is hurt, but I don't know if the reason is continuity. I don't think that's the reason at all. In fact, I think it's They just don't have the same amount of time to work with these particular players.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes complete sense. Johnny Mac, though, the stuff this week in the NFL land, franchise tag window opens tomorrow, right? That's tomorrow, the franchise tag window.
Yeah, I mean that is so irrelevant when it comes to Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, right. We don't even think about it much.
Yeah, I don't even think about it much. But it is. I mean, it is always a tool in your back pocket.
Well, I do like to look at some of the players around the league too. If someone's going to stick around, or hit the market potentially. Like I think Dallas is an interesting one there with Pickens and stuff.
Yeah, Dallas is a bad organization, so they tend to use it, and the rumors are already there. They're going to use it on Pickens. So
right.
The Eagles haven't used it since, I believe, Deshaun Jackson in I have to look it up, but it's 2012, 2013, somewhere in that range. That's the last time they've used it.
I think you're right. I think that's the last time, which is a long time ago. That's crazy.
Yeah, they just don't use it. They don't believe in it. It really doesn't, I love Mike Tomlin's quote. We want volunteers. We don't want hostages. It's never a good situation. Nobody's happy when the franchise tag is put on them. So you don't want unhappy people in your organization. That's how the Eagles operate. That's maybe why A.J. Brown's not going to be here. Not because they want to trade him or they can trade him or they get value for him or, from a cap standpoint, it makes any sense whatsoever. But if he truly doesn't want to be here, they don't want people who don't want to be here. And that's why they don't spend a lot of time mulling over the franchise tag. And certainly this is a year where they don't really have a player that would be franchise tag worthy anyway. Jalen Phillips would be the closest, but
yeah, that's the only name I would think.
But when you think about what edge rushers get paid and what that means for the franchise, it makes no sense to go in that direction. So Dallas Goedert at 31 makes very little sense, especially when they made him take a $4 million pay cut. So I don't think it's going to break the streak of Deshaun Jackson back whenever it was. So say 2013, 2012. I just popped it up. 2012.
There you go. Last time the Eagles. That's officially the last time the Eagles have franchise tag. Boy, that's a long time ago. 14 years.
Yeah. And that's about right when Howie came in. He just doesn't value it that much. But again, you never say never, but this is not the year they would use it. I mean, if it comes to a player you can't lose or this or that, you might use it as a placeholder, as you continue to work to get a longer term extension done. So, they'll probably use it again somewhere down the road, but it's not going to be this year.
Good stuff there, Johnny Mac. John, they made another hiring on Friday. I believe it was right after our show. And I kind of like the hiring, but we will talk about it a little bit here before we get to Jeff Kerr this morning. Pellegrino, John. Eagles hired Mike Pellegrino from the Bills as their listed as DB coach. John, kind of walk us through this because Christian Parker left. That was the first domino in terms of the defensive backs. He went to Dallas to be their defensive coordinator. I thought the Eagles had elevated somebody to his position. Now, tell me where Mike Pellegrino, the Bills coach, who just got hired by the Eagles, Bills DB coach, just got hired by the Eagles. Where does he fit in? And then what do you think of the hire for the Eagles filling out that back into that defensive staff?
Yeah, they did promote Joe Casper,
right? That's what I thought. Yeah,
to Christian Parker's job. So, the Pellegrino hiring is not officially official. They are going to hire him, but it's going to be interesting. So basically, last year how they set it up was Christian Parker obviously was the entire secondary coach and the defensive pass game coordinator. The nonsense title, as I like to call it, but those titles are what they are. You just promote the people, and they're relatively new, and I've explained that in the past. But and then I had a safeties coach who was Joe Casper and a cornerbacks coach who's Roy Anderson. So That's how the setup was last year. You don't have to say that, but the evidence is they're going to keep that. So my guess is Pellegrino is going to be the safeties coach when it's clarified, and Roy Anderson will stay at corner. Now his history in Buffalo is with Nichols. He was the Nichols coach last year. The Eagles haven't had a nickel slot specific coach since Marnell Williams in the year before Vic got here, so 2023 is the last time they had a Nichols coach. So my guess is Vic doesn't like that. Now, in his scheme, nickel and safety are somewhat mirrored positions. So that's why my guess is he'll be the safeties coach to replace Joe Casper, moved up to replace Christian Parker. That's the way I think it's going to shake out, because that's why Vic has handled the coaching staff both of his years here, and I think he'll replicate it.
How big of a loss, John, or how much different do you think that room is going to be now because of that loss? I mean, Christian Parker's obviously a guy. We talked about it when he left, but what do you think of the new hirings filled in, and how much of an impact do you think that has on the defense upcoming? They obviously still have Vic Fangio, who, we all think makes it all happen.
Yeah, as long as you got Vic, you're fine.
Yeah,
I believe that. So, yeah, I mean, there's much more consternation there, and there should be on the offensive side. You're going to lose some coaches. Surprised they didn't lose a few more coaches, to be honest. But that's just, again, we just talked about with the offensive coordinators. That's the nature of the NFL. It's just part of it. You're certainly going to lose guys each and every year, especially when you're successful. And when you're not successful, and I'm talking about long term, obviously the Eagles don't consider them. They act like a 5-win team, basically. They don't consider themselves successful. But they did, they did lose guys because they have been a good organization for a long period of time. And that's going to happen, and that's part of it. And it's even worse when you fire the head coach, because then you generally blow out the whole staff or close to it. So depends how you look at it.
Yeah, interesting stuff there. We'll see what ends up happening, John. And then the next piece of business that's coming quick, man. Combine is a week away. The NFL Combine. That's when you're really going to get into draft season. And now we're already reaching that point. Obviously, we're going to talk about it a little bit this week, a bunch, and get ready for it. But Combine's a week away, Johnny Mac. Everything is getting closer when it comes to the off-season moves that the Eagles will make, and everybody will eventually see what version of the 2026 Eagles we will get, my friend.
When you talk about personnel, and that's the biggest part of this league, obviously free agency, March 11th, the Combine is where you sort of talk and try to get the framework of deals. So they'll be trying to work out things with Jalen Phillips. Surely, people talk about big trades. If there's a trade, a lot of Max Crosby people out there. Obviously, if you're going to trade for Max Crosby, you're not going to sign Jalen Phillips. So there's a lot of hype about that. A.J. Brown, number 1 on the list. What's going to happen? There's certainly going to be talks. So that nonsense that, they're not talking about it, it's because you don't talk about anybody on Super Bowl week. So you're going to get further clarification on that. All that kind of stuff is it really going to rope up. And silly season, as I like to call it, is the Eagles are usually the headliner because they have a GM who's willing to do things and willing to do bold moves. So I've been saying that. I've been writing for this years. Every single rumor you will hear will include and the Eagles.
Well, it's fun. It's almost like an unintended, I don't know if you want to call it a benefit or a consequence of Howie Roseman's moves, John, that they are the lead headline. I think it's a benefit if you're Jeffrey Lurie, because your team is plastered on every story that's written about the NFL in the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. And you could feel comfortable saying, because the Eagles check in on everybody. So a lot of these net just feel comfortable saying, well, Howie's going to call because he always calls, even if it's just to keep a beat on what the league is doing. He wants to know the value of everybody so he can figure out the value best of what he wants. So he checks in on everybody. The level of interest varies greatly. But that's what I said, like Hard Knocks. I say that all the time. If you heard some of the behind the scenes conversations as a fan, you'd probably be upset because everybody gets talked about. Everybody. Even Zander Krause. Everybody gets talked about. That's not a story, but it will be made into 1,000,001 stories over the next few weeks.
Yeah, no doubt about it, Johnny Mac. John, it will be made into those stories. We'll be following it all along for you guys here on Birds 365. We'll give you guys the rundown as we go through some of this stuff with the combines coming up. That's when it's going to really get interesting. I'm starting to hear a lot, John, about that tight end in the draft, Kenyon Sadiq for the Philadelphia Eagles.
He's a big time player.
I watched him a bunch of college, but I wasn't sure how realistic him coming to Philly was, or at least being there at 23. But I do think there's a chance he could be there, and I think there's a chance the Eagles could take him, man.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to go up if you want him. I don't think he's going to make it to 23 because really it's supposed to be, from everything I've seen and talked with people about, it's supposed to be a pretty deep tight end draft, but there's really only one guy who belongs in the first round, and he's that guy. And generally, especially when you've seen the success of recent seasons of guys like, most notably Brock Bowers, but even last year with Loveland and Ty Warren, and you see the impact of the entire league going to, more of the Shanahan, McVay style offense where you need at least one pretty dynamic tight end. I think it's become more important to people.
Yeah.
And when you only got one guy up in that level, somebody's going to leap before 23. And probably from a talent perspective, he should be above 23 anyway. So I think he's kind of a player that they would definitely want. They got to, in a lot of ways, they have to remake their entire tight end room, probably. And that would get you off on a roaring start. So I do believe they'd be interested, but he's a guy I think you're going to have to go up and get. But there's a bunch of guys on day 2 and day 3. Eli Stowers from Vandy, Max Clare from Ohio State, Jack Endries from Texas, Michael Trigg from Baylor, Justin Jolly from North Carolina State. So a bunch of guys who could go day 2 or 3. And if they're not bringing Dallas Goedert back, they need to find somebody who can play right away and give you production right away. And that would certainly be Sadiq, but that's going to be a tough get, in my opinion, at 23.
Yeah, I agree. We'll see what ends up happening there. Maybe they have too many needs to go tight end, John, on day 1. What do you think of that? I mean, they always try. Obviously, you want to pick premier positions in round 1. They picked, corners recently. A lot of defensive line normally. A lot of offensive line. In their history. Do you think tight end is something they would go a first round pick with?
Well, I think we talked about how many stories to talk about. How many stories were written over the years about Jerry Robinson being the last all-ball linebacker for the Eagles to take in the draft, and then they took Jahad Campbell. And even then, we're all saying, well, the way how he talked is probably more of an edge.
Yeah.
Well, he turned out to be an all-ball linebacker. So, they haven't done it in a while, but they, Keith Jackson, I think, is the last one. Jeff's coming on, so he'll be able to confirm that or not. I believe Keith Jackson is the last first-round pick they've used on a tight end, but Dallas Goedert obviously was a second-rounder and pretty impactful. So I think Howie's good at just understanding the value, understanding you don't draft for need, especially in the first round. Now, that need, again, one of the 1,000,001 cliches in the NFL. Need is the worst talent evaluator in sports, which I agree with. But everybody drafts for need in a certain point. In other words, you have a group of guys, you cluster picks, and you're certain spots. You have a group of guys you want, but obviously, if you're have a all-pro quarterback, you're not taking a quarterback.
Yeah,
So
right.
even if the quarterback is the first on the list,
It's got to
you're
be
not taking
somewhat
him.
planted. Yeah, it can't be complete best player.
So there's some context to it. But I do think when it comes to the first round, you gotta be the type of player that belongs there. And I think Sadiq is. So I think he changes it a little bit.
There you go. Good stuff. We'll see what ends up happening with the combine in a week, folks. The franchise tag window opens tomorrow. We'll see. I don't think the Eagles will be using that, as they haven't. John pointed that out, since 2012. So a long time ago since they've used that. But a lot of good things happening. And then obviously the hiring of Mike Pellegrino to keep adding to that Eagles defensive coaching staff. That's the latest news here on this Monday morning as we get deeper into the Eagles off-season weeks. And it'll get more exciting here with the draft coming up, the combines coming up, and all the different things. Free agency coming up. We'll talk about all those different things.